Frequently in solo queue, I see players playing heroes that don't really fit their map because maybe they're a one-trick or they don't really know that their hero they're picking isn't very good on that map or game mode. So in today's video, we will be going over exactly that. Which heroes are good in which game modes and which heroes you should be playing on offense versus defense, because there is a difference. We're going to start off right away though with heroes that are just good all around. Any map, no matter what the situation is, there are two heroes I think are kind of non-swappable and irreplaceable, at least at the moment, in my opinion. Those two heroes are Lucio and Zarya. Lucio has been the #1 support in the game since release, and no matter what they do to him, they haven't figured out a way to make him significantly worse or even on the same level as Mercy. Mercy has always been inferior, and even now she still is. Lucio is an amazing support. Zarya though, Zarya actually has been kind of changing and fluctuating. Right now, Zarya is in a really good position, at least in my opinion and in many others' opinions. Zarya is probably the best tank in the game, and I'd even make the argument that she is the best hero in the game, and you should always have her in your games if you have someone that knows how to play her. It doesn't matter if the game mode is King of the Hill or Assault, it doesn't matter. Zarya is kind of a must-have right now. Her utility with shielding is amazing, she outputs lots of damage, and oh yeah, she's also a tank, so that combination of things is going to make her good in pretty much every situation. Now let's move on and talk about Assault, Escort, and the hybrid game mode that contains both of those. We're going to combine those all into one group because they all function similarly. They have a lot of choke points, and you're pushing a payload or pushing an objective in a very linear direction. We'll start off once again with the heroes I think perform well on offense and defense. And these three heroes I've picked for this category are Ana, Reinhardt, and Reaper. Reinhardt is the biggest one. He is a must-have on all three of these game modes, and I really don't think you can get away without having one. If one team has a Reinhardt and the other doesn't, the team with the Reinhardt's going to be at a massive advantage because they can just constantly output damage without really receiving anything in return. D.Va's defense matrix can only do so much, and so can Zarya's shields and Winston's bubble, so having a Reinhardt is kind of non-negotiable. What's funny is the reason I have Ana and Reaper on here as well is because of how well they synergize with and against Reinhardt. I like having a Reaper on these maps because Reaper can simply shred the enemy Reinhardt's shield very quickly, and when both teams have a Reinhardt, whoever drops the other team's Reinhardt's shield first is going to be at a huge advantage. So when it's a very close choke point and it's a very tight squeeze in the fight, a Reaper is going to deal a lot of damage, taking out the enemy Reinhardt's shield first unless they also have a Reaper, which should give your team an advantage. The reason Ana is on here is because, for one, she's actually really powerful recently. I'd argue she's more powerful than Zenyatta at the moment, and she synergizes amazingly with Reinhardt. When she gets her nano boost and she nano boosts Reinhardt, it's kind of game over for the enemy team unless they have a few defensive ultimates or the enemy Ana sleeps him. It really is an extremely powerful combo, and with Reinhardt being necessary on these game modes, Ana kind of follows suit. Heroes that are good on offense on this game mode right now include Tracer or Genji and Winston because of the popularity of the dive comp, which is basically where you have a few heroes that dive the enemy team's backline, taking out their supports, then their damage dealers, and they leave pretty much everyone else to die. So it's kind of an interesting combo. When you're on offense on these game modes, it works very well to have a Tracer and a Winston, or you can replace that Tracer with a skilled Genji, and yes, that Genji needs to be skilled because Genji was nerfed. Basically, you get what I'm saying. On offense on these game modes, having flankers is obviously going to be much better than having these flankers on defense. For heroes I think are powerful on defense for the Escort and Assault game modes, I actually only have one. All the others kind of perform well on both offense and defense, as I've mentioned, or they're just kind of neutral. They're okay, but not great. And the one hero I think performs very well on defense on these maps is actually Mei. Mei is kind of a hero that's been seeing a little bit more play recently with a few of her strats. For one, Mei's new strategy where she puts a wall up as soon as one enemy moves through a choke point to cut them off from their team is extremely effective because she basically puts up the wall, separates the first person that pushed from their team, and then it's a 5v6 after you kill that one person. So Mei's been seeing a lot of play in that regard, and it's actually quite hard to counter that if the enemy team knows what they're doing. So Mei on defense on these game modes is actually pretty good right now. Before we move on to King of the Hill, I figure it's probably appropriate to talk about which heroes are bad on the Assault and Escort game modes, because it can be helpful to know. And the heroes that are bad on these game modes are kind of really the heroes that are just not in the meta right now. So your Torbjorns and your Symmetras, despite what people say, are not good on these game modes. I'm sorry. Widowmaker, unless you're Kefri or a really good Widowmaker, it's not worth playing. Junkrat and Bastion, while both being very powerful at times, can both be easily countered. Soldier 76 is just a worse version of a good McCree. Diva is not good. She's just a lesser version of Zarya, in my opinion. Pharah needs some buffs. Mercy needs some buffs. Hanzo and McCree are two that are okay if you have a good one. A good Hanzo and a good McCree can really win games for you. However, average Hanzos and average McCrees won't be doing too much. Roadhog, Zenyatta, and Genji are actually the few heroes I don't think are good on this map, but are actually pretty good heroes, simply because they don't perform well against Reinhardts. When the enemy team's behind a Reinhardt shield, Roadhog can't hook them, Zenyatta can't put his Orbs of Discord on them, and Genji can find it hard to receive support from his team when he dives their backline. So I think Tracer is better in this situation, and these three heroes are much better suited for King of the Hill, which we're going to talk about right now. Now, King of the Hill obviously doesn't have an offense and a defense, so we're just going to talk about which heroes are good on King of the Hill, and then we'll move on to which heroes are bad on King of the Hill. The good heroes include, obviously, the ones I said are good always, which are Lucio and Zarya, as well as a few others: Tracer, Winston, and Zenyatta. Now, I did say Roadhog was good on this game mode too. We'll talk about him in a minute, but for now, Zenyatta, Winston, and Tracer. Ever since Genji's nerfs, Tracer has been receiving a lot more play because she wasn't nerfed, and she's still a very good flanker. Her mobility is insane, and a lot of the King of the Hill maps don't have too much verticality, and without verticality, Tracer reigns supreme because she obviously can't blink up and down. She has no upward mobility. So on maps where upward mobility isn't very useful, Tracer takes the cake. Much like Tracer, Winston is useful because, first of all, he's not like Reinhardt. He doesn't just defend in a linear direction. His bubble can defend his team from all directions, which is very useful on King of the Hill. And also, his extreme mobility is extremely valued, much like Tracer's on King of the Hill, because King of the Hill, it isn't as linear as the other game modes. So you're going to want to be places. You're going to try to flank the enemy team, get behind them, and prevent them from getting on the point, meaning Winston and Tracer are both going to be very good. Zenyatta is also very good because without an enemy Reinhardt, you can actually discord targets, and when targets are discorded, they die very quickly. Also, you can primary fire into enemies, which is very powerful. So these three heroes are going to be very good on King of the Hill, which is also called Control, which I never really realized because I've always just called it King of the Hill. So if you were confused, yeah, Control or King of the Hill, they're the same thing. Now, I mentioned Roadhog, so let's go back and talk about him very briefly. Roadhog can be an extremely powerful tool on King of the Hill. However, there is one time I think he shines better than all the other times, and that is when there is a hole or a gap somewhere near the control point on King of the Hill. Like, let's say Ilios, for example, the one map has a hole right in the middle of it. So if you're Roadhog, you can pull people straight into that. And Lijiang Tower also has a gap in it in one of the versions of the map, so he's going to be very good there as well. Any map basically where you can pull someone into a hole or into an area where they can't receive help from their team, Roadhog is going to be good on. Now let's move on to heroes that aren't really favored by this game mode. The first two are going to be Reinhardt and Ana. I list these two first because they're still much better than all the heroes I'm about to list, the really bad heroes in the game right now. Reinhardt and Ana are both just a little less useful because, for one, the game mode, like I said, isn't as linear, so Reinhardt's shield is a little bit less useful, and with less Reinhardts around, Ana is also less useful. So those two kind of go hand in hand, but they still work, and they still can be used. These heroes I'm about to list are pretty much never used, and I don't recommend using them. And they're pretty much the same heroes as the last one, they're just bad heroes in the meta right now. Torbjorn, Symmetra, there's really nowhere for you to set up your turrets, so you can't even make the argument that they're good this time. Widowmaker, Bastion, Junkrat, Soldier 76, Diva, Pharah, Mercy, they're all just not good picks. McCree is also quite bad on the King of the Hill game mode because you don't have a Reinhardt shield to stand behind. Some neutral picks I'd say that are okay include Genji and maybe Reaper as well. Reaper is not too bad if the control point is in an enclosed area. Also, I'd like to say, it kind of goes without saying that if I didn't mention the hero as exceptionally good or exceptionally bad in the game mode, they are probably someone who's picked maybe about half the time, or they're just, they're not good and they're not bad either. They're just an average pick on that map. This does conclude our talk on which heroes are good in which game modes. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast. I feel like I talked very fast. So I'm going to go back and actually add some visuals to the screen. Hopefully those will help you guys see what I'm talking about. And be sure to leave your feedback down below if you agree with my picks, if you disagree, and also your feedback about the video itself, the quality, and maybe how I sound or how fast I talked. Hopefully you all enjoyed though. If you did, be sure to leave a like down below, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at LoneHawk. That's a 0, not an O. And I will see you guys all later. LoneHawk, out.